So, today's topic is Kingpin and Nemesis, and I have very helpfully already done my Kingpin fight, so we'll have to talk about theory more rather than actually going to poke one thing. But that's kind of fine. A lot of it is more important to talk about the theory rather than anything particularly interesting happening in the fight, so in some ways it's a distraction I'm avoiding. Um, I guess the initial place to start is where they are, which is in the gang hall. And the Kingpin fights the 13, appears every day, can attack it once a day. That's a recent change, it used to be 2, but now it's 1. And then the little arrow on the right hand side, which is actually surprisingly difficult to find if you don't know it's there, takes you to the other 2 options, which is Big Jim, um, who, other than the icons look different, actually has the same first 3 skills. But then the next one reduces the effectiveness of recovery skills by 90%, which, given that I personally don't recommend any recovery champions, makes capos even, makes it very easy to avoid that one. And then Jester, who is actually way more confusing. Again, first 3 skills are the same again, but Jester specifically has all enemies steals buffs, but by steals it means copies. So it's not actually quite as clear as what that actually means versus what it does, but it means that in reality you don't need to run a special lineup versus Jester. I would actually just recommend using your normal lineup and not actually making any different. It just means that normally you do slightly less damage to Jester, but that's fine. The other thing to mention, as you can see here, is the Kingpins that aren't 13 can only be opened 4 times a week each, and requires contribution points to be able to open. So you will normally only have one of the 2 of them open at any one time. And there is a timer, 24 hours compared to when it's opened to when it closes. So with time zones and when it's actually opened, it does mean sometimes you need to be a little bit careful to maximise your CP. Okay, so that's who. I may as well cover team fight. The slightly confusing part is it's called team fight, but then you're fighting a Nemesis. So there's lots of things where Nemesis and team fight is a overlapped description, but they're one and the same thing to me. Again, they have very similar skills. So damage one thing randomly, damage all capos, and then every time they lose a life, as they call it, so lose a health bar, they gain increased damage, and then every 10 rounds that's doubled. So essentially, it just scales up in damage to stop it being an infinite fight where it just essentially eventually does so much damage it just one-shots everything. But then the special thing about Nemesis is there's a variety of different Nemesises, which is a real mouthful, and they have different skills in that last slot. So I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but again, whilst it does matter and does change the amount of damage you do, most of the time you don't have the luxury of being able to swap capos around, so you just use the same lineups week in, week out. But if you are trying to optimize, sometimes there are a couple of capos you can swap in or out. Manson being a particularly good example, reducing damage skills by 50%. And also the frustration of capos having left this last one at 7 health is on the screen just to remind me. But there we go. So, I guess the only other special thing about Nemesis is that it's Monday through Friday. You get 2 attacks, and if I were to have an attack available now and do that 7, I get to reuse that attack, so you don't lose that attack, which says it in the info somewhere. There you go, it says Monday to Friday. There you go. So point 3, the second sentence where it says the player who kills a Nemesis will get an extra challenge and can reuse capos who still have HP. and that you can't fight it on Saturday and Sunday. There is also the boost for Nemesis, which you can't see because it's not here. It's normally in the top left, roughly head height. There's a little cog that has a multiplier on it. The way that multiplier actually works is if you hit a 2 times multiplier, it adds roughly +7 damage vials to your teams. I've done a reasonable amount of testing. It doesn't really appear to be any different. Sometimes you get 6, sometimes you get 8, but roughly speaking, doubling your damage only adds +6 or +8 because of the way the scaling works. So when your gang does do boosts, it is still important to attack whilst boosted, but it's a bit of a misleading information to say it's doubled, because yes, it is doubling stats, but because of the scaling, specifically that scaling, it means that even if you're doubling it, you don't actually suddenly like double the amount of damage in terms of vials that you're doing. It adds 6 to 8, normally 7. Okay. Don't know if I can show. I can. Excellent. So, should we start with this, or should we start with Kingpin? Let's start with Kingpin, except I can't probably show you my attacks on this. No, I can just show you how much damage. That's fine. We'll do the Nemesis one. That's very similar for lots of good reasons. So, other team? Yeah, slightly mix it up. Okay, let's go to formations then. Let's do Kingpin first. It's a good place to start. So, my Kingpin formation isn't even here. Well, that's clever. Let me go and fix that now. In fact, it gives me a good opportunity to take you through all the different ones that are going through. So, the thing I will... I don't think I need an attack to go through the demonstration, because especially if you don't use the skip, the only thing that's worth watching is the end of the fight, is how quickly the damage ramps up to the point of which it just one-shots everything. And specifically, which I'll touch on briefly now that Funky's mentioned it, I will start with, if you have end game capos, the ones you want to run are... Where's Azumi? And Cheer. And it looks something like that. So if you are endgame, have loads of deluxe gear and maxed out capos, the lineup's been figured out pretty well, and it's hard to beat this combination, which is Miranda, Chiyu, Eugenio, Izumi, and Gigi. The main thing that revolves around is Chiyu having Awakening, having an absolute ton of fight power, and the nerf skill triggers at the start of every set of 5. So even though it says, for example, mine says 60%, even if it at max stars it'll be 100%, it does actually apply twice for that full 200%. So other than Chiyu having lots of fight power, it's also her nerf skill, doubling the damage, or even a 2 times multiplier on the damage. Eugenio's there for the lifesteal, which again in the end game gives especially Chiyu the ability to basically live forever until she gets one shot. And the fight power is a useful boost. Azumi's there for the fight power boost to all teammates. Gigi's there for the fight power to all teammates, and the 20% HP. And Plasma Blaster on the 3 of them gives you lots and lots of crit chance, in combination with Miranda, especially now the skin's out for diamonds. The Miranda skin doubles that, so normally it would be a 15-ish% crit chance, which is then doubled to 30% crit chance while above 35%. And then the most important part is the crit hit multiplier. So I call this critical damage. So whenever you do a critical hit, it does additional damage. And that 2.5, even though mine is 3 diamond stars, if you have it at a base of 1 purple, it's 2.4-ish. So you actually get a lot of value even out of a 1 purple star Miranda. So that's endgame lineup. That's what eventually everyone will be running, give or take. For me, for example, because my Eugenio is 2 purple and my CMV is Awakened, my main account runs something like that. Because I have some stars on Ava, but she has a similar sort of thing where she's adding fight power chance. The dodge chance doesn't actually really matter because only their normal attacks don't do that much damage anyway, and are only targeting a single person. So even the counter attacks do practically nothing. But I'm leveraging very much a similar sort of thing with the Azumi adding crit chance to everyone. Just CMV is also adding an extra 20%, and because they're Awakened, they also happen to have a lot of fight power. So let's go on to options you can run. So for accounts that are just starting out or early to mid game, before you get to that point where you've got Dulux gear, the meta for what you can run in Kingpin is actually wild how much you can run that's viable. So let's go through a few capos that are really useful even at low stars. Wheels. Mine on this account, let's go and find out because I can't remember, but it is important. 2 purple. And the main thing that Wheels offers is the nerf skill, which reduces the fight power, so even at only 2 purple, reduces the fight power and skill damage by 60%. Again, numbers rounding, close enough. So what that does in Kingpin, and for that matter, Teamfight, Nemesis, is since it applies every 5 rounds, it means that even though they double the number of stacks that they have for the amount of damage they're doing, Wheels is constantly ticking down it's sort of counterbalancing the fact they're scaling up really quickly by constantly applying a 60% debuff. So it is really, really, really strong. And again, even at 2 purple stars, you don't need to invest any resources into him for him to be useful. So on this account, I do actually use Wheels. There is also CMV is also another quite surprising one. Again, 2 purple stars. The main reason that CMV they add a lot is actually very indirect. It's because of the 20% crit hit chance that they offer to themselves and the 2 allies. Combos really strongly with Miranda, because before you've got to endgame where the plasma blasters give you that crit chance, this is a way where you can add 20% crit chance to capos without needing the plasma blaster. So CMV, also the prevention of dying does help a little bit, but it's not actually as good as it sounds. But it does help, but it's mainly there for the crit chance. Again, especially if you happen to be focusing CMV, although I wouldn't recommend Wheels, but Wheels, if you happen to be focusing either of them, they're really good. Chiyu, again on this account where I've got 3 diamond on Ava, Gianluca and Miranda, Chiyu still makes the lineup for that nerf skill, so in the same way that you use them when they're maxed. But just adding 200% damage. And then for Nemesis, the Mitsukuni, and I apologise for butchering that name, the black belt skin. So they normally look like that. and their skill doesn't do anything particularly interesting. But then when you get the black belt skin, it adds the similar thing to Chew. In fact, it doesn't stack with Chew, so only run one of the two of them. Where it adds a 100% damage taken. Again, because of the way Nemesis triggers, when you over the course of the fight, it will trigger multiple times and therefore take you up to that 200% cap. So that has a lot of value. 1 second. Okay, cool. So, Mitsukuni skin is worth purchasing later. I should have also mentioned the Chew skin adds the damage. Wrong one. The Chew skin adds the damage skill, which if you're not focusing Chew, doesn't actually add much value. So the skin for Kingpin and Nemesis at least doesn't add that much, because a stun for 1 round in a very long fight with many rounds doesn't offer much, and it's only 50% chance. And the damage it's offering, so example here is 107k, which is nothing. So that's why I don't have the Chew skin, for example. If you're focusing Chew, I'd definitely get it, and for PvP it's a totally different conversation. Similarly with the Izumi skin, all it offers is, instead of the stun being prevented, it's a stun reflect. So you don't need the Izumi skin in the context of Kingpin and Nemesis. The Miranda skin is incredible. As I say, the base one adds the 14.8, so roughly 15% crit, and then the skin doubles that. It also disappears at 50% health, whereas the passive version of it triggers at 35% health, so it drops off. So Miranda skin, now it's out for diamonds, definitely worth purchasing, even if it's just for Kingpin and Nemesis, even if she's low star, so don't get C mine at 3 diamond star and think, oh, she needs to be high level to be functional. She works really well at low stars. To an extent, so does Izumi and Gigi. Less talking of Gigi. Gigi, also his skin is super valuable because his base one is self and surrounding allies, adding the fight power, whereas the skin version does all teammates and increases 20% health. Eugenio, I did briefly mention earlier about the lifesteal, but again, at 1 purple star, can be very powerful in Kingpin and Nemesis. So, how many have I covered? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Ava. Ava, much like Izumi and Gigi, offers a fight power buff, and fills that similar sort of role. She's not as good as Izumi or Gigi in the context of Kingpin or Nemesis, but again, especially on this account, for example, where she's a 3 diamond star, she therefore has better stats and therefore can be used. But don't overlook Ava. And then the other surprise, which you'll hear lots of people say, don't use any mythicals in Kingpin. There is one slight caveat to that, which is in early game, before you get to the point where you have lots of stars and levels on things, Tentacles happens to be one of those that you normally would invest a lot of resources in, so would happen to have more talents rolled, and so and have highest stats. So, for example, for me, it's one of the ones I'm investing most of the cigars in. So, naturally, being higher level means he is more useful. And the other reason he works really well is because of his healing, which just keeps most things alive for just a little bit longer, which can make a big difference. Now that I mentioned talents, there are a couple of options that you should try and makes a difference for each account as to which is better. If you're running Miranda on your team, I think I have Miranda set up with them. Let's double check. I do have both dodge chance. No. There we go. So again, applicable more to mid-game, early-game type accounts, but before you get access to the Plasma Blaster, the critical hit chance talents can be really useful on not just Miranda, but whoever else is going into the team with Miranda. The other option is these damaged Kingpin Nemesis. You'd have to try them to know which is better. It does depend a lot on which capos you're using, which combination you are using, and if you happen to have saved them in the first place or not, because especially if you've not saved one set or the other, it's worth holding on to them for that reason. So it's it does make a difference, and I think the most important thing I'm going to say about that is, I mean, refer back to the talents voice chat recording video to go and have a look at that, and where I go through why you want to go and save loads of other talents. But if you happen to have been following that and therefore happen to have these saved, try them. It doesn't, it takes a bit of time to set up the page and go through it, and it will take a couple of days of testing, but it's worth spending that time to maximize your damage. And the reason I'm not going to recommend one particular lineup is because the answer is, especially in the early game where you've got a mix of different capos, different stars, different talents, the answer is it's really difficult to say what the best lineup is. I would just try different things, but I would try a mixture of things like Tentacles, Miranda, Ava, Azumi, Chew, Wheels, CMV. If you happen to have the black belt skin for Mitsukuni and don't have Chew, I don't know how you'd manage that, but hypothetically speaking. But I definitely wouldn't use both of them in the same team. But for Nemesis, where you've got two different attacks, I'd try and get both of them, one in each team. Eugenio is a big one early, and for 2,000 diamonds, the early investment of 2,000 diamonds, giving you more points back in Kingpin and Nemesis, earns you more diamonds. So even, like on this account is 1 purple star, my main is like 4 purple star, 5 purple star now. Even though he's compared to max capos, he still has a lot of value at that low star rating. You don't need to explicitly invest lots of resources into Eugenio other than the skin, and it's worthwhile investment early. And I skipped GG on running through again. So try different stuff, try different combinations, try and put the highest fight power capos either side of a Eugenio. So this is where I will go on to formations and start using that as an example. So it's team 5 and 6 that I've got set up for my team fight attacks. So I'm leveraging the fact that Tomo has full fight power talents and therefore has 1.5 billion fight power, and Tentacles with just happens to be one that I have lots of invested in. Fight power talents are better if you happen to have them, but again, I wouldn't, as per talents rolling, I wouldn't go out my way to start rolling loads, especially early game. So my tents will have damaged Kingpin, and then there won't be any talents on Chiyu because I'm not invested in her. Eugenio won't have any talents. I'll just level them up as high as I can, stick some gear on them so they got some more health. And then Ava's there for the fight power buff. Whereas on the other team, I'm intentionally comboing the Miranda with the CMV, and again the other one who again wouldn't necessarily be high on most people's lists of, this is a really strong capo for Kingpin or Nemesis, but for my account he has a lot of fight power talents on him already, so he becomes a natural include because I'm focusing him is Gianluca, especially when I eventually get to the point where I start investing some into Awakening, he will have an absolute ton of damage and therefore will do a lot of work. Um, and I'm using him as an example of a capo that I'm focusing. For you, it may not be Gianluca, it might be a don't know who else is popular that I'm not using at the moment.
There's a lot of people here.
There is a lot of people here. It's great. That could very well be an Azumi or a Gigi in that slot. And yeah, okay, sure, they will use support talents, but it's more that they are there as a sort of a combination of buffer and having lots of fight power because you're investing in them. And I honestly can't think of any other capos that would go fight power that you potentially want to put in here. But let's say a slightly less popular but good example. There we go. So Yuya, I can't click on him. Let's take Jimika out. Let's say you go for Yuya, who is a popular-ish Japan capo, slightly less meta, but hypothetically speaking, if he was one of the ones that you were focusing and had lots of stars and had lots of fight power talents invested in him, then you could use him in that sort of slot for that purpose. And then Wheels and Mitsukuni with the skin to do the debuff. So if I quickly escape out of that again, so it means Team 5 and 6 have roughly similar fight powers. I don't stress overly too much and go, oh, they need to be really close. But the general rule of thumb is you can either split them up like I've done, where I've tried to move, mostly because of my links, where I can run the two mythicals with lots of fight power either side of Eugenio, and on the second team to highest fight power at either side of CMV, and then comboed the Miranda with the CMV. And I've intentionally split the Chiyu and the Mitsukuni with the black belt skin to do that doubling. And Ava, you could because again, this count doesn't have Azumi or Gigi leveled, but normally they're two quite popular capos, so that's the sort of slot that would go instead of my Ava. You could run both of them, means you'd probably drop someone else out, depends on your preference. But again, the answer to what you should run explicitly varies wildly on every single person's account. Try stuff out, give it a go. Again, as you sort of started heading towards end game for team fight, what you end up using, and I will probably swap over and go to my phone so I can tell you exactly what I'm running. 1 second. But you tend to run your Kingpin lineup in one slot and then whatever you've got left over in the second team. It doesn't always work out like that, but it does actually tend to work out to be better in the end game again because of the plasma blasters, because of the crit chance that you're missing out on. But I have done some combinations of tests and that works what's best for me. Again, recommend just trying stuff and seeing how it works. So let me quickly steal this team. I don't even know what this team is for. But my setup for my main account is I don't actually have Godfather in this account, so let's use Tomo as a placeholder. I guess it doesn't really matter too much. But you'll see how similar my team is for my main account to my second account. Partly by coincidence, partly by design, partly because those are the good capos. So again, it's Wheels, the Mitsukuni for the debuff, and then Tense and Tomo either side of the CMV. So I'm not leveraging the Miranda crit because Miranda's on the main team, which is so I have a Max Azumi, a low star Eugenio, a awakened Chiyu and Miranda, and you would run GG, as I say. Also on my main account, I don't have a level GG. Instead, I have that Ava, who has more levels. So that works better for me on my main account. But I guess that's sort of the point I'm making is even within my two accounts, which are at different points in the game, you run different things. And the way I found that is by trying things. So don't be scared to try something slightly different, even if it's not, you don't think it will do better, just give it a go. Yes, it will cost you one attack. Yes, it might be slightly lower, maybe it's slightly better. But for me, that's part of the fun of the game, is trying these sort of things out, trying something slightly out of the box. Um, I have done a reasonable amount of testing with Omega and haven't had any great success yet, but there is a little bit of a potential there. I haven't quite figured out how to abuse him yet, but can be quite fun watching Omega res things constantly. And the one other special mention goes to Wesker. Um, is, again, I haven't quite figured out the best way of using it, but his nerf skill reducing skill damage, a lot of the damage from the Kingpin and Nemesis comes from their skill damage. So because his nerf skill nerfs skill damage, it's actually better than you'd expect. Um, so I think that's all of the special mentions that I can think of. Yeah, that's everyone that I can think of. The restoration capos actually have a surprisingly good amount of value if you happen to be focusing them, but they're really out of meta, so you don't tend to find many people with them. And there's one other one that's worth mentioning if you happen to be focusing them. There we go. Enzo. In fact, I'll go to the page that shows you a skin. Where's Enzo hiding? There he is. So Enzo skin gives you lots of fight power to self and surrounding, and again, focusing on that skill damage element, is it reduces skill damage taken by those allies by 40%. So if you happen to be focusing Enzo, he will do good work in Kingpin and Nemesis. Again, not necessarily the first choice, but if you happen to be focusing him, I would definitely leverage him. I'd definitely purchase his skin for him for that reason. Cool. So, covered compositions without showing specifically telling everyone to run X, Y, or Z. I have shown, briefly touched on talents. I guess the other ones I missed is Gigi and Azumi and Ava should run support skill. Damage to Kingpin is the budget option if you don't have full fight power, but full fight power is really good. Miranda, you can run things like damage to Kingpin, but on those capos, the other budget option that works is crit chance. Again, depends what your talents you have. And then for gear, again, let's just use my wheels as an example. Chuck some gear on them, level up that gear to the point where it's not costing you any. So 8.8B when I have 21T. I'll even do one level up for the purpose of the video. That costs me, see the last number just changed by one tick. So it hasn't really cost me anything getting it to level 100, but it gives him some amount of extra HP and fight power just to get him to live maybe that extra round, which makes all the difference. And it hasn't really cost me anything equipping it other than a bit of time. And of course, leveling them up to the max level that they can go without explicitly investing loads of resources. So 2 purple star, 1 purple star, especially if you're leveling up some capos for some family bonus. You can sort of double up by leveling up ones that are used for that. So the example of Izumi and Chiu. Wait, where's it gone? It's not under. Where's it hiding? I scroll past it. There we go, jailbreak. So the reason I like the Izumi, Chiu, family bonus, they're both Japan, both useful for Kingpin, Nemesis, and that jailbreak coin bonus is really useful for extra coins. But again, it's not that I've explicitly focused them, especially compared to my other capos, but just if you happen to be going, oh, I want a Japan family bonus, I'm just going to level up someone at random. There's a couple of good options. Same with wheels for the Italian, etc. Cool. And I think that is it. I think I've covered everything. I'm sure I've missed something. I always do. Um, yeah, I am going to call it there and say if anyone's got any questions, initially, preferably if there's anyone's got any questions on Kingpin or Nemesis, we'll start there, but then I'll open it up to general questions and answers, anything about the game that you want to know. And feel free, rather than actually having to talk, to type in the chat. I guess is the more important part because I know lots of people don't want to talk, but that's
I have a
fine.
question, but it's not about this.